Evening, everyone. Welcome to Nuckatuck's June meeting, the last meeting of this year. Dennis Reed, president of Nuckatuck, and we're delighted to see a nice crowd here on a rather warm evening. Air conditioning here, at least, so that's good. This place is brutal if it's not. Yep. And I only have two announcements. One is we have our whale watch coming up in August. This flyer's on the back table. It's out of Plymouth. The cost is $29, and it's a really good trip. Carl Harvey has done it for the last several years, and the whales that he's seen are fantastic. So if you're interested in that, there's a flyer on the back table. And the second announcement is that we'll be back here in September, on September 13th. Yes, 13th, with Bird Atlas of Connecticut. So have a great summer, and we'll see you then. And I'll turn it over to
Good evening. My name is Donna Lorello. I'm a local wildlife photographer. I guess the best thing to do would be to introduce you to how I got started. So why nature photography? Well, as a kid, I just always loved animals. We always had animals in the house, and I grew up in Branford, and my mother, I think I got it from her because she was one of those people that always had the little mason jars, and she'd pop holes in the top, and she'd go outside and collect bugs and caterpillars and fireflies on a summer night, and I sort of followed suit. So I would go and pick up little things, and she got me my first bug house, and I raised some caterpillars, and I took them through their whole life process and had them hatch out into whatever they would turn out to be, whether it was a swallowtail or a monarch or whatever the case may be. I was never into dolls. The one girl that grew up on my street, she was really into Barbie dolls, not me. I love dinosaurs. When I started school, little boy around the corner from me brought in a dinosaur model for show and tell. Well, that hooked me on that. And it just really solidified my whole love of nature. And forget Barbie. give me and then once the camera came, then it really changed. I started out, so I didn't do a whole lot of nature photography with little cameras like this, but the bug was there. And when my mother bought me my first SLR camera, that was it. I was done. She got me as a birthday present this Minolta film camera and my first little zoom lens. I had a 75 to 300 millimeter zoom lens. And granted, my photography at that point was not very good, but it started to open my eyes to what was really around me. So most of the pictures I took were not very good, but it was documenting all the things I saw in and around my yard. And I would start off just picking something up, maybe bringing it in the house, setting it up on a little box or something, and taking a picture of it, and then taking it back outside and letting it go. So it didn't matter what it was. Snakes, frogs, bugs, it didn't matter. I always had a bug net, and before a house was built between my neighbor on the end of the street and me, there was a little open area, and I would go in there and catch butterflies and whatnot, and just really enjoyed it. Then I went to college and met Noble Proctor and was able to get into a couple of his classes, and this man really solidified a lot of things for me. He was so into the environment, so into nature, and really helped me learn about a lot of things. I went on an eagle watch with him and learned a great deal about eagles. And I really wanted to get more into the photography part of it because I'm watching all these people with these huge cameras and lenses. And I'm like, I got this little dinky 300. And I'm like, okay, I need to do something more about that. But my first real photograph, I took something very similar to this with film. And I brought it into Dr. Proctor and I says, can you tell me what this is? I'd never seen anything like it before. It was flying over my house. And I asked him, I said, what is this? And he goes, oh my goodness, that's an osprey. And he was so excited that I had noticed this bird. And he told me all about the history of the osprey. And after I got done with college, I ended up joining with the Branford Land Trust. And they were doing a program to monitor our local ospreys. And the photography piece came in because I was able to photograph these, and with a friend of mine, we did some displays and started teaching people about the local ospreys. So we would go out and band as part of the program, and there's my friend Diane and my birding mentor, Peter Borgemeister, who also helped foster my love for the environment. And this was one of the first photo displays I did along with Diane. We compiled our photos together and we created this traveling display that went around Branford. And we talked about the history of the osprey and what the Branford Land Trust was doing with them at that time. I also did some work with Project Limulus and learned a lot about horseshoe crabs. And again, I did another photo display to teach about the horseshoe crabs. And here I am helping with some tagging. This is what my cat thinks of my photography. Care less, you know, very independent. So it didn't matter what the animal was. If I could get a lens on it, I tried to get pictures of it. A turkey vulture, a trout lily in my backyard. And I took these here, thank goodness for the microscopes at school. I got a hold of some plankton on a whale watch that I was allowed to take home. I was teaching as a paraprofessional, and I used one of the scopes and I took some pictures of the plankton underneath the microscope. So my current gear, I do use a digital 35 millimeter camera. My current one is a 17 Mark II. I like using crop sensors because it allows for a little more magnification, along with a long lens. My 400 millimeter prime lens is now my current go-to. I also have a 100 millimeter macro lens that I like for close-ups. I also have the regular kit lens that came with the camera that I sometimes use for landscape. I do have a tripod, and sometimes I will do long exposure, and I'll talk about that a little later on. And a 1.5x teleconverter for additional magnification. So I could take that, put that on my 400 millimeter, for instance, and make it like a 520 millimeter lens. So between that and the crop sensor camera, I get some pretty good magnification. And with wildlife photography, you really want to try not to get too close to the animals and not infringe on their need to survive and do what they need to. I also have a Canon 50D, it's another digital SLR, and that's kind of my backup camera. I also use some different kinds of filters periodically, not often, but sometimes I want to play around with what I'm doing on the camera, and sometimes color filters will render some unusual results. And just some other little odds and ends. So the whole point for me with getting out is just getting outside and enjoying nature, connecting with it. This is a captive bird at the Beardsley Zoo, and when I got that picture, I was just like, this bird is just staring at me. And you can't help but just feel the power of this bird. I've gone out in 2-degree weather and managed to get this drake goldeneye that was hanging out in Madison. So weather can't be a hindrance. This was on a trail in Hammonasset with bunnies. You know, of course, birds are usually, birds are my big, but it doesn't matter what it is. If I can photograph it, I'm on it. Dragonflies. This little guy. My mother kept seeing this animal running up and down the tree in our front yard. She says, I have no clue what it is. And every night we'd sit out on the front porch and we'd try to watch for this little guy. Never knew we had northern flying squirrels up in the area. So this little guy was coming at night and taking the sunflower seed out of the sunflower feeder. And I was able to go out and photograph it just using the flash. Tried not to spook it too much. And I got this as it was coming down the tree. But again, it was learning about things that I had no idea were even in our area. So I'm photographing these things and then I want to learn about them. I took a pelagic trip out of Chatham, Massachusetts, and there's where the boat picks you up. There were these gray seals, and they come right up to you. And it's like, they just look at you like, hey, I'm here, check me out. But birds are my main focus. I love photographing any of the kinds of birds. So I'll spend a great deal of time heading out to different areas. I've got several birding friends that we get together and we'll hit different places and try to photograph different birds. This was at Stratford Point, little warbler. And then this is up at Statuesque Nature Reserve of deer. And then this was kind of a shocker to me. I was down at a location in Madison and wanted to take some pictures of terns. And boy, I tell you, the camera really does come in handy because I went home, I had no clue what I was looking at. And I posted this picture to a wildlife group and I said, can somebody help me out with this? I have no clue what this is. And it turned out to be a Caspian tern, which is not normally seen up in this area. So the camera has become a way for me to record what I see, and then I can learn more about it, and then to share with other people what I've seen. And here he is again catching fish. My macro lens was such a gift. It's allowed me to look at the small things. And people don't realize the beauty of some of those small things. We tend to overlook those little things. And putting a lens on some of these here and taking pictures and getting to really look at them a little more closely. I mean, the honeybee with this little pollen pouch and a yellow jacket that was eating a drip of sugar water from my hummingbird feeder, or a assassin bug that had just caught its prey. I'm not a fan of spiders, but these little guys I adore. These are little jumping spiders, and they're comical little characters. They really will kind of look at you and kind of wonder if they're studying you as you're looking at them. And different kinds of insects. I'm not sure what these are. I'm still trying to research them and find out what some of these things are. But these are plants too that are growing in my backyard that I'm just allowing to grow. They're not, they're all natives, and I'll get a little more into that later. But as far as insects, one of my big things to photograph are butterflies and moths. And this was taken in a friend's garden. All different kinds of butterflies, a little hair streak. And then again with the macro lens, getting in closer, looking at the patterns on the butterfly's wings. And even closer, looking at all those individual scales that make up those patterns. watching the monarch butterflies and sipping nectar from some milkweed. Just getting in really close. And this is one of my favorites. This is a red spotted purple that was up in a friend's yard. It just sat there, and almost like it was inviting me to come and take a picture of it.
Do you use autofocus, or how do you focus on a hurry?
Generally, I do autofocus. I have my camera set on like fast shutter speeds to try to make things as still as possible. And in this case, I did use the onboard flash. I don't have an additional flash. I just used the one that's on the camera. I did need to throw some light on this. It was a bit in the shade. But the way the colors came out on this one, I was really quite happy with. One of my favorite butterfly stories was an encounter I had with this little red admiral. And he was in my backyard flitting around, so I went outside with my camera. I said, oh, I haven't photographed the red admiral yet. So I went out, and he's hopping from one shrub to the next, and I waited for him to settle down. He finally did, and I was able to get some pictures. And then he turned, and he's like, he's looking at me. And I went in a little closer, and I said, I'm going to take my chance, see if I can get closer to him. And he stayed put, and I was again able to get those really nice close-ups, looking at the wing patterns, those individual scales. And to me, it kind of reminded me of like an abstract painting. Getting in real close again to those wing patterns. But then he sat there, and then he turned a little bit. And it was almost like he was saying, well, take this side of me now. And then he turned forward, and he's staring right at me. I mean, I was with him for maybe a good 20 minutes. And it was like he just, I don't know if he was so enthused with the camera lens. I'm not sure, maybe he thought that was a great big butterfly eye. And this was the last shot he let me have. And it was almost like he was ready to say, okay, you've had enough, goodbye. And then he took off. And then last summer, I had this plant growing in my front yard. Thought it was just a weed. Well, I'm almost glad I didn't pull it. And again, this is where observation really came in. I noticed this little butterfly. And I had my long lens on. So I'm not really close to it. And I'm looking at it and said, something's wrong with that. So let me take a picture. I go in the house and I pull the photo off and I put it on the computer and I said, this is not a butterfly I'm familiar with. As it turned out, it was a Cassius blue from Florida. I happened to notice it had a lot more speckling on it than our usual blues that are up here. And I posted this photo to a butterfly group, and they went bananas. They were just like, where is that? So just, again, with the camera, I was able to record something and share it with other people. And they don't know whether or not this little butterfly trekked up from Florida, if he flew up here from a storm, or maybe he came in on some produce from Florida. They're not sure, but it was interesting to learn just how different this was from the others. And I had just happened to notice him being a little darker, and had I not taken some photos, I wouldn't have known what it was. My special picture was taken a few years ago, but it took me a long time to get it. As I mentioned before, I love ospreys. And my friend Diane, we would spend a great deal of time down by the Cranford River, and we would take pictures of the ospreys. We would watch the nests and watch the babies grow up each year. And I would try for all different kinds of photos. I've gotten them sitting. This guy was sitting up in my backyard, or flying, hunting. This one here was feeding up in a dead tree in my backyard. But the one thing I wanted more than anything was to get a picture of an osprey actually fishing. And I spent a lot of time trying to do this, and I had a great deal of difficulty. I didn't really find a spot that worked for me, or they would always be like this. They'd always have their back to me, and I would never see the action half the time. This one particular year, they had cut down quite a bit of the brush, so we were able to see more over the river. And finally, I got my shot. And this is a young female osprey, and she was just pulling a fish out of the water, and I just happened to get it. It's not completely sharp, but I used a really fast shutter speed to get this, and just managing to catch her wings as she was lifting them up. And I said, well, if I never photograph another osprey again, I'm good. This is it. This is my shot. And as was mentioned earlier, there is going to be a whale watch by the Pawtucket Audubon. I highly suggest it if you've never been out on one. I've gone out on probably about 20 of them now. They're amazing trips. I can't say enough about them. Being out in the water is just amazing. The different kinds of animals you do get to see that we don't get to see from shore necessarily. It's just incredible. This one whale I managed to get just as it was opening its mouth. And the seabirds are not afraid. They will go into a whale's mouth to pull fish out as they're feeding. But the behaviors you get to learn about too. This is a whale that's slapping the water. Now those fins, those pectoral fins, are 15 feet long. And when they slap the water, it's this incredible sound. And they think they can hear that sound miles away. They're not sure whether or not it's a communication thing or if it's an aggression thing. They're still learning about behaviors, but getting to see these different behaviors is really, really incredible. This whale was rolling. Maybe he was playing, who knows? And this one here was diving. And each humpback whale has a tail pattern that is individual. And they are a lot of times named based on markings that may be on that tail. And the pattern is usually set in when they're about 3 or 4 years old. So any young whales, they will not be given a name until that pattern is solidified when they're a little older. Breaching is probably the one thing everybody really wants to see. And I just happened to get lucky getting this shot. The whale was coming up right on the side of the boat. But again, the chances of seeing different kinds of animals that we don't get to see here. So being able to photograph gray seals or harbor seals or dolphins. That's a basking shark. And it's a filter feeder. It's quite a large, it can be quite a large animal, about, I just was told about 25 feet long or even larger. And again, taking pictures of birds that don't normally come into the area. This is a Sabin's gull. And the boat captain was really awesome about chasing this bird down so that we all had an opportunity to see it and photograph it. And then the Grand Dam herself. I got to meet Saul a few years ago. And Saul was one of the first humpback whales that was ever given a name when they started recording the different whales. And she had a partner, another female whale named Pepper, Salt Pepper. But Saul came back that particular year, I think this was 2012, and she had a calf named Zelly with her. So I got to finally meet her after all these trips I had been out, got to meet Saul. And one very special encounter I had was with a couple of younger humpback whales. This whale was rolling, and you get to see the belly pleats, and that allows the throat to expand when they are feeding. They take in big gulps of water, and those pleats expand out so that they can take in these huge gulps and then strain out the fish that they want to eat. and this whale was just getting ready to dive. But then it turned around, and it was coming right at the boat. And then it had a friend with it, and I don't know if they were playing tag, but they were going back and forth, under the boat to one side and then back to the other side, back and forth, for several times. And then it kind of stopped there, and the captain said, "Oh, he's people watching. We're out there whale watching. He's people watching." So I got to see really up close the whales. I mean, these are opportunities you could possibly have if you take that trip with them up again. Then the whale turned, and again, I just felt this incredible connection. When this whale turned, and you can actually look into its eye. And I just felt such a bit of energy, the same way as I felt with that eagle that was staring right at me. And it makes you wonder, what are they thinking? What do they think of us? And then back to birds. We see a lot of tree swallows around here, and I'm always so privileged to get to see them. And I know the Winona Audubon put up a lot of nest boxes around. And this is one of theirs down at Hammonasset. And this little guy just was sitting there, and then he'd talk a little bit, and his friend would come. And it's just interesting, and I just happened to get the light on this bird just right. And one thing I've learned with nature photography, some very simple things to keep in mind. If you're trying to photograph birds, is you want to try to have the sun behind you at all times. You don't get harsh shadows that necessarily get cast on them, and you can pick up their colors a little bit better. With this bird, it's a real contrast. You've got that real white belly and throat, and then you have a dark top side. And it's really easy for your camera to get confused and say, well, what am I supposed to be focusing on? Is it the light part or the dark part? So it becomes a challenge. But if the sun is behind you, you get a little bit more of an even lighting on the bird. And then I love this one here. It's like the two of them are arguing. Get out of here, this is my nest. And then getting a chance to see close up. And again, using a long lens helps with getting in close like this, but without having to be close. This mom was feeding her chick, and I waited and waited and waited to finally get this one photo of the bird. And again, I was using a fast shutter speed so that I can stop her wings, because she was still beating her wings as she was feeding the chick. And if anybody ever gets the opportunity, my birding mentor, Peter, he told me, he says, before you die, you need to go see the true swallows. So my friend Diane and I, we trekked up to the Connecticut River, and we went to see the tree swallows when they get ready to migrate. Every single one of those specks is a bird. And that was only a small portion of the cloud of birds we saw that day. Then there's always the nemesis bird. For me, it was a pileated woodpecker. I had never seen one. And in one summer, my first digital camera decided to die. And I was miserable not having a camera. And sure enough, here comes my pileated woodpecker. And the best I could do was using my crummy little flip phone. And I just was miserable. My mother could not console me whatsoever. I said, finally get to see a pileated, and I have no camera. I have no camera to take a picture of.
There's a lot of them with this line on.
How many times I've gone, and I have yet to see one. I don't know if they just purposely avoid me. But then I did get a camera, and I managed this one down at Hammonasset. So, okay, I guess crying about it sometimes works. So my general mode of thought when I do work is trying to have patience, practicing a lot, and respecting the animals that I'm photographing. Sometimes I have a plan, sometimes not, and many times I focus and pray. A lot of times I have no clue what settings my camera are on. I may flip it to a high shutter speed if I know I'm photographing a bird in flight. I have no clue a lot of times of what I set my ISO at. So I'm not going to get into the technicalities of using the cameras because honestly, I go by the seat of my pants. And a lot of times I'm lucky and a lot of times I'm not. And I'm grateful these days for digital because if I ever had to do this with film, forget it. I probably would have hung up my camera and said, forget it. One of the things I really got inspired to try, I have a friend out in Stratford, Donna. She loves to take pictures of sunrises and sunsets. And she inspired me to be able to try. I had never done it before. And I have another friend, Lynn, that she calls them like nature's paintings. Every sunrise is always different. And we went out together and I says, I really want to try this. So, okay, how do I do this? So I did a little research and I found out that there are programs like this that I use a great deal now called the Photographer's Ephemeris, and it helps point out locations where sunrise is or sunset, or maybe you're interested in the moonrise or moonset. And I can locate, using this program, spots along the coastline. I tend to like the coastline, where I can go and I can see using the different colors on there, whether I'm looking for a sunrise. Well, what direction is it coming from? What time is it going to be? And for us, most of the time, it's early in the morning and in the winter. So when my friend said, yeah, you got to get up about 5 o'clock, I'm like, okay, do I want to do that on a December day? Well, if you want the good sunrises, yeah, you do it. She also introduced me to a little mobile version called Moon Soul Cal. It'll talk to you again about sunrise, sunset, moonrise, sunset. It gives you different information, so places where you can go. So there are tools that you can use if you have a plan in mind and you know what you want to do. And I just find doing these sunrises now, it's so peaceful. You're out there, it's usually quiet, there's not too many people around, except maybe crazy people like us taking pictures of the sunrise. But you can get these nice early colors, and this is usually an hour before sunrise. You get these really nice blues. This was done on a tripod with a slow shutter speed. So it's too difficult for me to do it handheld. So I set it up on the tripod, and then I use a remote shutter release. So I'm not even touching my camera at that point. I set it up, I focus it, let it go. And this was at a spot up in Old Saybrook called Founders Memorial Park. This one here, I use this little tree as my little guidance, and one of the other photography tools is the rule of thirds, where you want to take your image and you want to split it into 3 parts. Another thing I learned about, which I didn't know. And I use the tree as my guiding line, and then I try to keep a straight horizon. So whenever you're doing landscapes, you always want to try to keep your horizon straight. And then over the progress of the next half an hour, just watching the colors of the sky develop as the sun is rising. And just as it's peeking over the landscape in the distance. And again, the colors changing in the sky. Then you get these warmer colors as the sun is rising higher. This one here, I decided to shoot through the tree. Something a little different. And then this one here was down at West Wharf in Madison. And again, I was shooting that early morning color. And down in Stratford at Birdseye Boat Ramp. Gil Simmons likes to use that camera down there when he's giving the weather forecast an awful lot. And I went down there and got a sunrise down at that spot. And this is a little seagull sitting on a pylon. And then I decided to try with my zoom lens to get closer shots, just to see what would happen. And I kind of ended up with these interesting images that were really tight on the skyline. And getting the different colors in the clouds is my main focus. And again, using rule of thirds. I didn't get too much of the ocean. I left that as like the bottom third, and the rest of it I wanted that sky. It was just so intense. And what I didn't realize, I'm going to step in front here, when I went to look at this on the camera, on the computer, I didn't notice at the very bottom, right over the water line, was a row of birds in flight. I didn't even know they were there until I looked at it on the computer. I know it's difficult to see there, but I was interested in the seagull that was flying, and I happened to notice there was another bunch of birds. This is down at Tuxas Island. This is a series of, I think, 4 frames that I shot in sequence and then lined them up and used a program to stitch them together. So I got this nice long image of that whole skyline. Pelagic birds are a big challenge. And these little guys, these little shearwaters, storm petrels, are incredibly fast birds. And photographing them was really difficult. I'm not going to tell you how many shots I've taken of them in past trips, and I ended up ditching them all because you couldn't even see the bird. They were so fast. So tracking them was really difficult. I went out on a pelagic trip out of Chatham, and the captain of the boat, it was a small boat that only allowed 6 people on board. He was really good about letting us get in really close to these little guys. And again, but keeping enough distance where it's not interfering with them doing their thing. They were feeding, and we were still able to get these really good pictures. Again, using the long lens, we don't have to get too close. So they can go about their business, and we can enjoy watching them. And these little guys, as they're moving around, it almost looks like they're walking on the water. And I was able to get a series of shots as they're moving about. And then finally taking off. And some other seabirds that we encountered on that particular trip. And again, a really fun encounter we had was at the bottom. This little great shearwater was following our boat because the captain was nice enough and he brought chum on board. So he was chumming and bringing in birds a little closer for us. So we got to see a variety of different seabirds. This little shearwater, he just followed us. He knew there were goodies on board. And when I got this picture, I was really interested in those pink feet. But he was so close to our boat, it was almost like he was going to hop in and come along with us. And he got so close, I ended up having to back off because my lens was too big. I couldn't even focus on him. I had to step way back on the other side of the boat to get this picture. But he just kept watching us, and I don't know if I coaxed him to leave, but we spent quite a bit of time with this little guy, and we enjoyed every minute of it. It was just interesting. Again, another feeling of connection to something that is not human. What do you do when you're out on a boat and there's nothing to photograph? Well, for me, water. I love the movement of water. So I took a series of pictures out on several trips when things had died down a little bit and there was nothing really interesting to look at. I was trying to get some of these different water movements and how it's splashing up as the boat is moving forward. This one here was one of my favorites. Just very calm, but this is the wake of the boat. And I like the patterns that it was creating, these little pyramid-like patterns as the boat was moving forward. on a stormy day. There wasn't a bird to be seen on this particular trip, but the water was rather interesting. And again, using a fast shutter speed, I was able to freeze some of these little upwellings, or a wave crashing on the beach. And there's a little storm petrel in there. But again, I just like the feel of the movement and just enjoying that peaceful sort of feel of being out on the ocean. Every time I look at these, I remember those things. And it helps me think back to how I felt at that moment. And another little shot. And then I go small sometimes. With the macro lens, I can get in tight. These are a couple of little dewdrops on top of a piece of grass. And what I found interesting was looking into the little dewdrop, you see the reflection of the grass behind it. It's very simple stuff, but I just find such enjoyment in being able to get in nice and tight to some of these situations and really seeing more than I think I would normally see, than you would see with your naked eye. I mean, it looks like a crystal ball. This was the edge of a piece of jewelry, the top photo, and each little dewdrop on the edge. Like a perfect pattern. And then one of the things I always did want to try was freezing water and getting these different, I'm not even sure how to describe it to you. But I like the feel of this. You could feel the action. You know the water is flowing over and coming in with action. Sometimes I want to get something, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it. The best way to do it is to wait for it. This is a northern harrier, and I knew this bird was going to take off. And I didn't know when she was going to take off. She sat on that nest box for a good maybe half an hour. She was preening, and I knew at some point, I said, well, she's got to leave at some point. And then finally she did. And I was able to get a series of shots of her leaving. And then I said, well, I'm not quite done there. She passed right near me. And then this was on another occasion. These birds are like kites in the air. They're so beautiful to watch. And again, fast shutter speed to freeze the action.
Donna, that's a question.
Yeah.
With the different views that you had, like you had the harrier from far away, and then you took that, what kind of changes do you have to do on your camera? Because do you have to change the lens, or?
Not me. I go with what I have.
So the camera that you have has that?
I just have that.
ability to do
I've been shooting right now with that one prime lens. So when you saw that picture of her sitting on the thing, she was like all the way on the other side of the marsh. But I was able again to bring her in a little closer using the long lens. And then just waiting for her to kind of, you're hoping that they'll do something that you want them to do. And I just happened to luck out that day where she passed right near me. So you're able to get those nice close-up shots, but it's waiting for it. Like this red-tailed hawk is down at Hammonasset all the time. He's kind of a ham. I think he doesn't really mind people too much because you seem to be able to get fairly close to him and he doesn't really spook. And he sat up in a pine tree one day, so I creeped in and I was able to take a couple of shots, and then I said, well, I'm going to push my luck a little bit. And I had plenty of space between me and him, so let me try to get in a little closer. And I did get close enough. And again, it's looking at the behaviors of the animals too. You start to learn where they might be stressing a bit. So I've tried to be observant of their behaviors. Are they wide-eyed? Are they getting a little annoyed with me that I'm getting too close? At that point, I'll back off. But he stayed there, and he didn't really seem to mind that I was there. And I said, well, I'm going to wait again. Maybe I'm going to get another nice flight shot. And that's what I got. So the prime lens is great, had I had maybe a zoom lens, I could have zoomed out, but this is sometimes what happens. I get the back end. And then I tried it again with a pair of red-shouldered hawks that are in my yard. I've gotten used to these guys, I think they're kind of used to me. And I was hanging out my window, and these two were engaged, I'll leave it at that. And then the male bird stayed there while the female took off. I said, well, I'm gonna wait here for a little bit and see if I can get that flight shot again. And I waited and I waited, and I said, okay, I have to get ready to go do something. Do I want to wait any longer? Well, I was glad I did, because he cocked those wings, and then he took off. And there was my flight shot. And again, with, glossy ibis, they tend to be a little more sensitive. They don't like people being too close to them. And with these here, I like, again, the long lens where I can stay back and I can watch them do their thing. They're feeding in the mudflap, setting him an acid. I bring this up a number of times only because I've seen photographers out in the field, and like on this one day similar to this, there was a gentleman out there, and I know he was probably interested in getting some flight shots, and me, I'd rather wait for the action to happen. He went right down to the birds and flushed them, and I'm sure he got probably a ton of great flight shots being up nice and close. But those birds took off, and there was no need for that. And then it also ruined my opportunity to take some photographs. And I was trying to be respectful of them, giving them the distance they needed, and here he goes down and just takes a bunch of photos after he spooks them. So I guess the message to take away from there is there's been quite a bit of discussion between photographers and wildlife watchers, and a lot of the wildlife watchers don't like people with cameras because they figure this is what they're going to do. I'm not one of those. I don't bait birds, I don't flush, I try to be respectful of them, I try to give them the distance they need. But there are those that don't necessarily follow those rules, and it's really sad because I think it ruins it for everybody else. And plus, you don't get to enjoy them for what they are. To be able to see them, here they are, they're nice and peaceful. I'm back far enough. They're not annoyed by me. They were preening. And then sure enough, here, flight shot. I didn't have to flush them. I didn't have to annoy them. I didn't have to aggravate them. They did it by themselves when they were good and ready. And I got to enjoy it. And I got to really study the way they were going about their business because I'm not interfering. Same thing with this little willet. He came in and he started showing off. And then a lady willet came in. Then the action really started to happen because he started squawking. So it's a lot of fun to be able to be out there, but also to know that you can see things if you just let them do their thing. Here he is. He's letting her know he's all full of himself. And then this guy, I was at Hammonasset last fall, and I had been watching great egrets a number of times fishing, and I wanted to get a shot of the great egret with the fish in its mouth, or at least pulling one up. And these aren't exactly the best shots, but I went home with 1,600 images of this one bird. And this was one of my keepers. He's off in the middle of this little marsh right off of the pavilion, where the ramp is that you walk up to go into the little pavilion before the beach at Meg's Point. And he just was fishing away. He just happened to be facing me, and I snapped a bunch of pictures, and I just happened to get that one shot where he's launching that fish up in the air so he could swallow it. And there was another shot. I just happened to catch that little fish getting ready to go down into his mouth. With 1,600 images I had to sort through. Again, thank goodness for digital. If I ever had to do this with film, forget it. There was no way. And the birds and bikes. Wintertime, we get these large groups of Sanderling and Dunlin that will come in and take Manhasset or Stratford. And again, this is just a small portion of the group that was down here. This is at Long Beach and Stratford, just a small section of what was there that day. But what I found with these little guys is they can be pretty tolerant of you, again, if you're respectful. So I would just sit on the beach, and I would wait for them to come to me. And they're going about their thing, looking for whatever in the mud. But they come in really close. So I make sure that my movements are really slow, that I don't do anything fast that would startle them. And if you make yourself as small as possible, they're not as threatened. So like if they are standing with a big lens pointing at them, yeah, they're gonna look at me and say, But I found if I sat down and I made myself as small as possible, you could get shots like this, and they're not frightened. And again, with the long lens, I can get in these closer, intimate shots without spooking them. I mean, they just smell it. It was like having a guard dog almost. The one in the middle, the other two were trying to sleep, and the one in the middle always had his eye open. He was checking everybody out, making sure nothing was going on. So my friend took a photo of me out on the beach at Long Beach, and this is with my zoom lens that I was using at the time. I did have a zoom. I retired. I like having the prime lens now. But look at how far away I am from birds. I'm not having to be on top of them. And my friend Jerry took this one, the left-hand photo. I am down behind a rock. I'm in camouflage. And there was a loon in the middle of the water. And being able to not be too conspicuous, making my movements slow, I was able to watch this loon for quite a while go about his business. And he was catching crabs as the water was moving through this little inlet. And then the best was yet to come. I said, okay, how much better could it be? You're watching these birds feeding and not interfering with them. Then he turned around and opened his wings up and got ready to fly away. You couldn't ask for this. You just couldn't ask for it. And then this is my friend Donna. She's down on the beach, and you see how she's laying down. And this is on a day where we had a snowy owl. A snowy owl is a very sensitive bird, as are most owls. And she got down on the ground, not to be too conspicuous, and using a long lens, and the bird is way off in the left-hand corner. So we're quite a distance away from it, and not frightening it. Because we don't want to have these animals expending energy, especially something like this that has migrated in a long distance. They're probably really tired. A lot of times they're not exactly 100%. So we don't want to add additional stress by going out there and annoying them with our lenses. And this was a shot I was able to get. He's not too stressed. And again, we were watching behaviors, making sure that the animals weren't stressed. He turned and looked at me. He didn't seem like he was too bothered. I mean, had he opened his eyes really wide, I probably would have considered that an alarm, and that it was time not to get any closer. But we stayed back far enough, and we're able to get these really nice pictures of this bird without stressing it any further. And then we backed away when we were done. We didn't go forward. We didn't want to pass by it. So one of the things you need to keep in mind is knowing your subjects. Try to learn your subjects. If you're going out to shoot something in particular, what kind of behaviors should you be looking for? What kinds of concerns are there for the different types of animals you might be photographing? So my friend Jerry and I wanted to get some piping plovers, which are endangered in Connecticut. And we knew right away that we had to be really careful because they blend into the ground. I swear, it's so easy to step on them if you don't see them. And this little plover I nestled down into the sand, and this little plover came within maybe about 20 feet of me. Now, the bird made this decision itself. I was plenty far back with the bird, because I think again, keeping my movement slow, being quiet, not trying to make myself small again. The bird came over and nestled itself down. And it sat there for quite a while. So no disturbance to the bird, and I was able to get, with the crop sensor camera too, that's that extra magnification. This is a slight crop of the original image. And then what was cool too was seeing that the bird had a band. When it stood back up, I had this bird, and I sent the band number in to one of the Pipe and Plover studies, and found out that this is a female bird, and she had been at this particular location before. So having the photo, I was able to let the scientists know that I had seen her, and where she was, and at what time, and they document that information. So I was glad to have gotten that picture and to learn a little bit more about this particular individual. And sometimes with birds, they can be a little more flighty just because of their nature. This is not exactly my best image, but I happened to be down in Hammonasset in the fall last year, and this little warbler was pretty close by, so I was taking some pictures and observing it. And then a bird that I've very rarely gotten to see up close decided to come in and pay a visit. And it was this beautiful brown thrasher. And he really took a lot of time, and he was kind of checking me out and staying really quiet. I did lift my lens very slowly to take some pictures, but he stayed there. Any other time I've seen these birds, a few times that I had, whether they were in my yard or elsewhere, they tend to, the minute you make one little move, they're gone. This little guy hung around for a little bit, and I was able to get some really nice pictures. So for me, overall, I consider myself a student of nature. I try to follow the rules, and granted, sometimes I make mistakes. I do occasionally flush birds that I maybe didn't know were there. I don't engage in baiting, which some people have done, where they'll put out something that will attract a bird in, especially predatory birds. They'll put out meat or whatever. They want to get those birds in close. I don't do that. Take out what you bring in. I'm good at carrying a bag, and usually I'll try to pick up garbage as I'm wherever I am. And I love what I see. And having the camera with me all the time, it really has allowed me to be a better observer. I'm photographing different things, but I'm amazed at the diversity of life we have just right here in this little area, just between my house and Hammonasset, for instance. There are so many different things, and so many things to enjoy. And I've learned so much about just our own basic diversity. And it kind of saddens me that sometimes people overlook those things. I mean, I've had situations where people come up to me and, what are you looking at? I said, well, it's a blah, blah, blah bird or whatever. Oh, okay. And they just go on their way. And don't even consider the fact that I've maybe spent about, a half an hour trying to get closer to something, or waiting for something to get closer to me, and they just walk by and flush it away from me. Thank you. So I really go bananas at people, especially if they're on their cell phones, gabbing away. You're in the middle of this beautiful woods or something, and you're gabbing away on the cell phone. Turn it off. And sometimes people don't exactly follow the rules. I was out in Hammonasset last winter. It was cold. And I was trying to get pictures of some birds, and this little ruddy turnstone, which I had not seen up close. And this person's dog, off leash, supposed to be on a leash, and running back and forth and chasing birds. Oh, yeah, okay, I admit, I took advantage. Birds were flying, so I took a few shots. But I did tell the person, I said, Hammonasset rules, your dog is supposed to be leashed. I got a lecture that day. But I did manage some nice flood shots. And then another thing I learned from some seasoned birders was that you can get some really nice photographs just sitting in your car. They don't seem to be too threatened by your car. But the minute you step out, they know there's danger. So I was down at a spot in Madison, and I just sat in my car, turned it off, and this is a saltmarsh sparrow, which is, I believe, on the endangered species list in Connecticut. So they're not too easy to see. They tend to hunker down into the grasses.
Globally.
Okay. So this little guy happened to come up, and I was able to get some shots because the camouflage of the car didn't spook the bird. And I've done that with a number of birds. I just rest the lens on the door of the car. And this is a black-bellied plover and a merlin. And then this is one of my favorites that I got just this year of a killdeer for little ones.
Killdeer.
Those little legs. Mark. And my friend Monica and I went out to Plum Island just this past weekend, and we just had a blast with the kingbirds that were all over the place. And another friend who was into photography said, make sure that light is your best friend. And as I mentioned earlier, whenever I'm photographing birds, I try to keep the sun behind me. This was an early morning at Founders Memorial Park, and this little park that's there overlooking water. And I just liked the way the light was shining on the park benches and the trees that were behind this little circular area. And then this was a spot outside of New Britain, I think. I don't remember back. But the mist coming off the water I was trying to get. And a goose that was flying in that I didn't notice until I got home. Sometimes I try to do something that's a little different. And in this case, I liked having the sun in front of me and shooting these little flowers that were growing at Ammonasset. And I liked the way the sun was coming through the petals. And then I was taking a walk with a friend in Sharon, and I don't think she even noticed this. And I did. And I liked the way the sun, again, it was coming from in front, the way it was coming through those phones, those golden tones. And then this daylily. Sometimes accidents just happen. I will sometimes be taking pictures, and one of the things I like to do is I take multiples. I set my camera on continuous shooting, and I can do a series of, say, 10 frames in a short time, just holding the button down. And this little warbler, I was hoping to get just a picture of it sitting, and it ended up taking off, and this was a complete accident. I had no idea I had this picture until I got home. And then this little warbler, same thing. Totally didn't expect this. And it's not exactly a clear picture, but I liked the action, the movement of the wings, the movement. I know this bird was leaving, and I just liked the action that it was showing. Or the lighting on this stuff was just perfect on a fall day in Meriden. Some of the oyster catchers down in Milford, Audubon. Catching birds in flight is one of my favorite things to do. And we see a lot of birds in flight. And this was another accident. I did not intend for this, but maybe it doesn't appeal to a lot of people, but I really enjoyed this picture, this young red-tailed hawk as it was landing in a tree, just catching that wingspan as it was landing. And flowers are another favorite subject. I love sunflowers in particular. My business name is Sunshine. and looking at patterns, getting in close with the macro lens, looking at the seeds that are developing. And using the sun at different angles. I like the way the sun was coming through the angles on the petals. And then Buttonwood Farm. What a great place. Oh my goodness. The fields are just amazing. And with this one here, I wanted to get that typical, gotta get the field. And then I wanted something a little different. So this was taken on a faster shutter speed. But then I wanted to try something different. So I set the camera up on a tripod and I did a slower shutter speed. And I kind of got that waving motion of the flowers. It was just a slight breeze that day. It was enough to kind of give it a little bit more of an abstract feel. And then getting it nice and close. There's a little honeybee on there. I didn't notice that until I got home. And then in indigo bunting, I just decided to pop in. My friend went bananas. It was a lifer for her that day. She got to see this indigo bunting. And he sat there and just sung his little heart out for quite a while. We just enjoyed watching him and blew on that beautiful yellow flower. And into my backyard again, I have these little wild geraniums that were growing, and I had the sun just right behind me. And it was early morning when I took this here, so it's a little less harsh. Early morning sun tends to be your best time to photograph even birds. You don't have those harsh daylight shadows that can result. And with the flowers, trying different angles. I like to experiment. I don't like to just document things anymore. So this little flower, I took the typical front shots, but then again, I wanted to try something else. So the lower image is from behind with the sun coming through the bloom. And then a morning glory. And this one here, the sun was just above it, but it made everything behind it black. So when I got the photo on the computer, I was so surprised at how I just happened to expose that almost, what I would consider almost perfectly. It blacked out behind it and just left me with that bloom, that really pretty pink bloom. And this was taken in my friend's yard, her daylily. More flowers in another friend's garden. I like to look at different forms too. So being that this was a vertical plant, I went with the vertical image to try to capture as much of it as possible. And different flowers. These are, I believe, were all at NatureWorks Garden Center. They let me take some photos on, they were doing a tour around their gardens, teaching people about gardening, different plants, and just trying different angles. This is a daylily, and I just like the way the petals kind of give some movement with this image. Or even a little mushroom, looking up underneath it. So I was down on the ground. I was on my belly taking this one and shooting up with a macro lens into the mushroom. So most of my images, even though I have gone out to different places, a lot of my images that I've been taking have been right in my own backyard. And I got really into the native plants. So I've been working on getting rid of a lot of the different plants that we've put in over the years that are not native. Burning bushes, for instance, which end up seeding themselves all over the place. So I put in this garden in the front yard, and I have a variety of different plants that not only are beautiful, but they're wildlife friendly. Milkweeds and cutleaf coneflowers and different salvias. And salvia is probably my only maybe sort of non-native I put in, but hummingbirds absolutely love it. different milkweeds and host plants for butterflies. I have dillweed that I plant and echinacea. Butterflies absolutely love this. And not only for the wildlife, but it allows me some opportunities to go out and do some photography and try different angles of the different flowers. And I've been looking at a variety of different tutorials online, learning about different photography techniques, and trying to employ some of those myself. This was a cardinal flower I got through the Normantuck Audubon, and another big hummingbird plant. They just really went nuts with this one. I put in bird boxes, so along with my gardens, I have my little bird boxes, and this is a little baby housefly, I believe, that was peeking out. Oops. And some of my lettuce boxes with chickadees and hummingbirds that would come in for the different plants that I put in. The goldfinches love sunflowers, so I make sure I put sunflowers in. And this was taken from my car. I just parked my car on the side and right in front of my sunflowers, and this little goldfinch came in. We had a tree that fell, and we had it cut up, and instead of having it hauled away, my mother had this brilliant idea of lining up the chunks along the side of the edge of our property. And I hesitated about this, and why do we want to have tree trunk parts all over? And it ended up being a great idea because it provided more habitat for the wildlife, or even these mushrooms that were growing. I was really intrigued by them. Their color is quite stunning, and I like the glossy look of them. And of course, it brings in the birds. And this sharp-shinned hawk came in. He was interested in the smaller birds that were walking along, and he's hung out there for quite a while. And I took this right from my downstairs window, so I didn't have to go very far to watch nature. It's almost like having my own nature program just right in my yard. The chipmunks. They love to run along those wood chunks. So I get a variety of different birds and animals into my yard. My birding mentor, Peter Borgmeister, always called my yard the little oasis. He said, you're the little oasis in the middle of suburbia. He says, all the animals love to go to your place. So whenever we did our Christmas counts, we'd always start at my house, because we can immediately pick up about 30 different species. Like this little warbler and hummingbirds. And I don't put any kind of herbicides down on the ground. I have learned to embrace dandelions. They are beautiful flowers. I don't fight them anymore. And then I've been lucky enough to get some clover to grow. And I'm right near a marshy area, and I get a plant called jewelweed, which I understand is great being a poison ivy. So the hummingbirds really like that. So I'm letting a set of that grow each year. And I get a variety of different winter birds. This is a white-throated sparrow. Different warblers and vireos that will come through during migration. And I've even had some rarities. This is a pair of rusty blackbirds I had on two different winters. And then my mother happened to catch sight of this bird. She was looking outside and originally sitting on the dog's runner. She said, there's this really strange looking dove outside. So I went and I grabbed my camera and I took some pictures, and I put them on the computer, and I said, something is very different about this bird. It ended up being a white-winged dove. I sent the photos off to a couple of folks, including Noble Proctor, and he went bananas. He said, I'll be at your house in like 5 minutes. And he came right over. I ended up with 2 of them over the course of a few weeks, and It was interesting how people are so into birding that I had a couple that drove up from Virginia to see this bird. So having the camera, having the photographs, everybody went nuts. They knew where, I said, hey, you know, come on out, no problem. So a wide variety of birds. I tend to get cardinals, catbirds, Baltimore orioles, toads, and the butterflies. I love catering to butterflies, so my native plant garden is really geared for them. Letting plants grow that other people would consider weeds. I have goldenrod that's just growing naturally. I did take out the butterfly bush. That's gone. These are spice bush swallowtails. And this was an interesting couple. These two butterflies were, I guess the female was not too interested in the male. She was trying to give him the cold shoulder, but he wouldn't listen. And I watched them for quite a while as he attempted to pursue her for quite a distance, all the way around the house and back in the backyard. He just wouldn't take no for an answer. And having the different plants and the host plants, I was able to raise up some swallowtails from start to finish. Had some female butterflies that laid eggs, and I raised them up through the caterpillar stage all the way through the chrysalis, and then finally to being able to release them. And I had my first crop of monarchs last year. They really need that milkweed, so I can't say enough. If you have the ability to plant some milkweed, get some into your garden. I don't think I had this milkweed more than a couple of months, and the butterflies came and immediately began laying eggs on it. And this is a Polyphemus moth, which is a nocturnal moth, and they're quite large. A friend of mine made me moth sick. She raised them up, or had been given some that were in pupa, and she was getting ready to go on vacation. She said, they're not going to hatch by the time I'm leaving. Can you moth sit for me? So I said, okay, I'll moth sit. This is interesting. The day I was going to pick them up, this particular one just happened to hatch out, and it was in a little enclosure that I had put it in, and when it spread its wings out, these are massive moths. I mean, they're probably about 5 inches across, wingtip to wingtip. So I have a batch that I'm waiting, hopefully will hatch, and I'll get some more photos like this. But it was just interesting watching the behaviors too. This was a female, and what they do is they beat their wings when they are trying to attract a mate in. And the males will pick up on the scent that is released from the beating wings. And how could you say no to a black one? This was a very tired raccoon. This was a pregnant female that had come up on my back deck, and I guess she just needed a nap. I say no to nobody. I mean, I love them all. And the deer come in. Most of these here, again, I'm just taking straight out of my windows. I'm not having to go too far. And they're just doing their thing. I'm not disturbing them in any way. I try to be quiet. This is in the woods behind my yard on a snowy day. So with my photography, I had spent a lot of time just documenting things, but now I'm trying to take it to another level. I'm trying to get my images where they're telling stories. And this is something that's my goal for the next couple of years. I want to try to master some of those tools that some of those really well-known photographers are doing, where you can look at an image and you can see the story that's being told. So this was a gull that was eating a crab, and I liked the water and the way the bird is positioned, and we knew he was eating. But that's where I'm hoping to take my photography next. And not even needing to be too terribly close to the birds, catching some of the environment that they're living in. This was a barn owl that I saw in Rhode Island, and I went with a friend, and I said, oh, let's try to get down a little closer. She goes, no, let's stay right here. And I was actually happy that she made me do that, because we got these really nice images of this bird just hunting. And we watched this bird catch whatever kind of rodent it happened to catch. And just seeing it, it's just so majestic. But seeing the habitat that it's in too, without having to be too on top of it. This one here, I like the way the golden colors were behind it, and it really made that bird sort of pop out a little bit more. Or the swan on an early morning. This one here, I will admit, my friend and I tried to be very patient to wait for this little guy to come out. This is a marsh wren. They love to be in the reeds. We waited, hoping we can catch sight of him. And she says, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to play the song. And she played the voice of the marsh wren on her cell phone. And sure enough, they were so territorial, he just had to come out and investigate and see what was going on. But we both got the same exact picture. And I love water, so anytime there's a bird with water, I'm a water sign, so I think it just seems like I need to have water in my shots if I can. And then this one here, I just felt very at peace with this one. Just this little goose sitting on the beach in Stratford, or this is Milford, sorry. But you can kind of see there's a story being told there that he or she, is looking out, just kind of checking things out, relaxing. And back down at Himmanassa, this is one of my absolute all-time favorite pictures. This one here is a young blue heron, and I believe that's glasswort that is behind it, but how could you go wrong with that beautiful white on that red? And that was a total flake. I did not count on that picture happening. And then he took off, and I got this shot. Now, some people might actually think this is too blown out, but I like the feel of this, because you just see the pattern of the feathers a little bit more against that light background. Yeah, yeah. And then a northern harrier banging in the marsh. And again, not being too close. I got some of the environment in it, so you kind of get a feel of where these animals are hanging out too, instead of just being on top of them. This little guy was in my backyard. This was an early morning. I liked the way the sun was playing off of the fur. And this is him at daylight. So you can kind of see the difference between the early morning and later in the day where it's a little harsher on the light. And his friend, he wasn't too happy. And then one of my other very favorite animals is the coyotes. Everybody can't stand the coyotes. I love them. I love coyotes. This one here was in my yard on a fall day, and I got to see either it or its friends over a period of a couple of weeks. I'm not sure if I have a deer trail that the deer tend to use, and I don't know if they were following the deer, but I happened to be photographing some warblers when this fella came through. And then I saw it again on another morning. Those eyes, though, just to look into those eyes. Yeah, to look into them, just, you feel that connection. And then again, on another morning, in that same stare. You're brave. Well, again, hanging out the window, I mean, I'm sure the dog is probably looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? This was taken with a filter. I showed you this image earlier where I was trying a slow exposure with the water. And this was taken with a blue filter. So sometimes I like to move around with my pictures. And this is something else that I enjoy doing, is sometimes I'll take a picture and okay, yeah, it's a picture of another animal, but I want to try something funny with it. And I've taken them and I've run them through the computer. Now, not everybody is too keen on post-processing their images, but sometimes I like to move around with them. I never know what may turn up when I'm playing around with some of the filters or different programs that you can put in on your computer. So this was a tiger swallowtail, and I ran it through a filter, and I got this unusual kind of image with it. And these were some tiger lilies that I did the same thing. And this was actually a really bad photo. This was taken through my scope, and it came out horrible. The original image looked absolutely awful. It was very dull. It was slightly out of focus, but very hazy, and no matter what I did to try to post-process it, it was not working. So I said, okay, I hate to just delete it. So I took it and I ran it through the same filter that you saw with the other photos, and this is what I ended up with. And I really liked it. Just getting that impression of the bird without having to see all the detail.
Is it a Photoshop filter or what?
I'm trying to remember what that one was. I believe that was a Photoshop. Yeah. This one here, a friend of mine told me about this program. Optics, I believe it's called, and it had a sepia filter on it. So this was a robin, and again, it was not a great image to begin with, but I hated to just delete it because I liked the pose of the bird. So I ran it through the filter, and this is what I ended up getting. So sometimes those bad images are worth saving because maybe you can mess around with them and get something rather artistic with them. These are a couple of pansies that I took, and I ran it through a filter called Fractalis. And just to show you what I mean, this was a barred owl, and Karen Hannon had this bird down at the Father's Day thing for the Branford Land Trust one year. And this was the original image. Now, obviously, this is not that stellar. I mean, there's the background tents, there's lights, the bird looks pretty. But then I ran it through a filter, and I got this. So, really kind of stunning. So taking a bad picture and turning it into something else. And this was another filter, same bird, same photo, just a different filter. Monarch butterfly, this was with optics. This is the dream filter, where it faded it out a little bit and it kind of gave it that dreamy quality, which I really liked. The original image, again, was not really all that terrific, but I'm running it through this filter. I gave it kind of a little more of an artistic feel to it. This is down at the Branford Supply Farm. Not too great. I was hoping for nice foliage, and it wasn't exactly my best day. But again, I said, I'm going to try this with a filter. And this is a program called Photo Sketcher. This is what resulted. And I actually had a print of this made, and I went down to AC Moore. I said, just for giggles, I wanted to see what they would charge me to kind of print. Well, while I was there was a professional photographer who was getting some prints picked and framed, and she looked at that and she goes, what did you do with that? She goes, that looks like a painting. I said, I just ran it through a filter, and she said, wow. She goes, that is amazing. And I really felt kind of pleased. I said, here's coming from somebody who's a professional in the field, and she really enjoyed this picture. So I said, well, maybe I'm onto something here. So don't always throw away those bad images. Sometimes you never know what you can do with them. This is down at Lighthouse Park at the Hawk Migration Festival. I love kestrels. Kestrels are one of my favorite birds. And this is Brian Bradley, who was giving a falconry demonstration. So I took some photos of the kestrel that he had, and I digitally altered them a little bit. I turned up the saturation of the pictures to really make those colors of the birds pop. And I made this collage out of those shots that I was able to take of his birds. So I took him out, just pulled the birds out of the frames and set them on their own image, and I created this collage. Same thing here with this coyote. I happened to catch this coyote. It was an absolute awful, awful photo that I had. It was taken at night, so it was really grainy. Not an image I could do anything else with, but I ran it through a filter and I combined it with this picture of the moon I had taken, and I really liked how it resulted. And I did have some prints made of it. I gave one as a gift to a friend of mine who was a big coyote fan. And then another one of my all-time favorite images, this is Skywalker, who belongs to Horizon Wings. He's a ambassador bird, golden eagle, who was injured. And I had taken a very similar image to what you saw with the Karen hand and barred out. He's with his handler, but I took him out of the frame and I bumped up the saturation on this image and just created a black background. And I got some really nice compliments on this particular rendering of this photo. And I ended up having some prints made into greeting cards of this here, and I sent a pack of them off to Horizon Wings to thank them for letting me photograph their bird. So similar sort of situation, I had this tiger at the Beardsley Zoo, and I ran his image through a filter after pulling him out of the background, and I got this as a resulting image. I do want to get some prints made of this. So this one here is a work in progress. You can kind of see where I'm starting to black out around the animal, and then I'll have to go in and peel out the parts where it meets with the animal's fur. And that's rather tedious work, but I think in the long run it does create something that's a little more artistic instead of seeing an animal in the zoo next to a stone wall. So in summary, Steve Irwin became a big fan to me, or I was a big fan of his right after he passed away. And he said, we don't own the planet Earth, we belong to it, and we must share it with our wildlife. And I've really taken that to heart because I hope through my photography, when I share it with people, I hope they're taking away the same sort of feeling. Because I don't think everybody really appreciates what's around us and that we are part of the bigger circle. And he also said if we save our wild places, we ultimately save ourselves because we are a part of the big picture. So, some suggestions. Getting involved with citizen science. This is the Monongapoc Purple Martin program. You could become a landlord to a purple martin nest. It's absolutely amazing to be able to get in, and they were generous enough to let me last year photograph the nest and the youngsters when they hatched. I mean, to get these intimate pictures of these birds that really are depending on us at this point to provide them with nesting areas. So, my photographs too, there have been occasions where I've noticed birds that are banded. I took this out on the Chatham pelagic and didn't realize this bird had a band. And I sent the number of the band in and I received a digital certificate and a thank you for recording the birds so because they track where these birds are going. So being observant and seeing what's out there and in this case sharing an observation with the scientists, they're able to continue their studies, and we can help them with that data collection. And then, of course, respecting our animals. I'm not going to tell you how many times I've seen people get too close to delicate nesting areas. I try to be respectful of those and stay back. So if you do see these signs or you see people that don't listen, please, I don't hesitate anymore to tell people to back off. I was at Harkness Park on Monday with a friend of mine, and there were some folks that were getting way too close to these terns that were nesting in. Even though the signage was up, they're ignoring it, and both her and I were hollering at them, you got to back off. I said, not only will the birds peck you, but you're upsetting their ability to take care of their nests. And there were several pairs there, so it would be a shame to have these animals be injured in any sort of way because of our inability to be respectful to them. So I want to thank my special people, Dr. Noble Proctor and Peter Burgermeister for being my mentors. I grew up on Jacques Cousteau TV show, Steve Irwin, Sir Richard Attenborough. Creative Live has opened my eyes to the ability of getting better at using my camera. And of course my birding buddies, Geraldine Bonneray, Diane Lynn, Monica Jan, Sophie, and big thanks to the Nuttatuck Audubon and the Branford Land Trust. If you want to find me, I'm on the web under Sunshine's Creative Endeavors. I'm on Facebook under the same page name, and I'm on YouTube as Wildlife Watcher. I've been trying to post some little videos here and there of things that I've taken. But I want to thank everybody for coming and for listening. Does anybody have any questions that I could possibly answer?
Can you read those bands with your phone on your phone?
If I get good close pictures, sometimes I can magnify them where I can. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. I find some of the fish and wildlife ones that we do have, the silver ones, like I've photographed ospreys, and I cannot read the band. So I really wish they would do something about the bands themselves. Some of them, I think the engraving is, they either need to put something on it to make it a little more legible when they're out in the field.
We've usually had hummingbirds by now. Are they later this year?
You know,
Hummingbird feeder.
I'm having the same problem. I had a pair come in and then all of a sudden they disappeared. I haven't seen them in
I was
probably,
wondering about those storms in the Midwest.
that's what I'm wondering.
Because the rain brings them back. They've been back 5 years now.
Okay, yeah, I've had them for maybe the last 2 or 3 years.
So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, the weather patterns have been really strange. And that's what I've heard from other birders, is that things that you don't normally see at this time of the year are actually staying later. And then things that should be coming in are not here yet.
I can't imagine how they travel so far. They're so damn.
Well, they are big things. Any other questions? All right, again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The Whale Watch, I've put a new sheet with information about it on the back table there, and I am trying to get your input in terms of who would like to go as soon as possible, so that I can make those arrangements with Bob, who is going to be giving us the discount for the trip. So earlier is much better. Thank you.
And go native.
Yep.